Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Former White House senior advisor Peter Navarro's trial beginning today with jury selection. He's accused of not cooperating with Congress during their January 6th investigation. NTD's Melina Wisecup is outside the D.C. courthouse with more updates for us.
Good evening. Yeah, so the first part of this trial phase began and was completed today with that jury selection process. But Navarro, upon arriving at the courthouse early this morning, told reporters that he plans to take this case to the Supreme Court. Here's what Navarro had to say.
It's about the constitutional separation of powers and executive privilege. A case costing over $1 million or more.
And when Navarro was asked by our colleague Jackson Richmond over at the Epoch Times if he was willing to take a plea deal, he said, we'll wait and see how this process plays out, not denying that he would take this plea deal, but of course not supporting that idea either. The judge says that this trial should be a quick one for Navarro.
So, Melina, there was another January 6th related proceeding in that same courthouse there that you're standing in front of. Enrique Tarrio, leader of the Proud Boys, facing sentencing. What was the outcome?
Yeah, so he was the fifth and final Proud Boys member, but he's not just one of the members. He's the ex-Proud Boy leader, and he was charged. We just got the sentence just moments ago with, he was sentenced to 22 years in prison, which is the most of any of the Proud Boys members. They've been charged with 18, 15, some with 10. So he has the maximum charge here, 22 years out of all of these Proud Boy members that have been charged so far. Now, that is much less than what the federal prosecutors wanted. They asked for 33 years, arguing that the peaceful transfer of power is just a fundamental thing here in the United States. But of course, it's much more than what the defense team wanted for Tarrio in that case. They wanted 15 years. And the defense team today argued over and over again that sentencing him to any more than 15 years would put him on par with those other Proud Boys members that were actually here on January 6th. Because remember, Tarrio was actually not here on that day. He was arrested a few days earlier for burning a BLM flag that belonged to a church, and actually he was charged with that as well. So he does have some criminal background here. But the judge has his own analysis and reasoning for why he chose that 22-year sentence, much more than those other Proud Boys members. Multiple times today throughout the hearing, the judge referred to an analogy that Tarrio gave, that is comparing George Washington to one of those Proud Boys members that was here on January 6th. The judge said this was an example of slandering the founding father. So he mentioned that multiple times, and right before his sentencing, he also mentioned that. So we can tell that definitely touched the judge as part of that key evidence that federal prosecutors used. But as you mentioned, yes, this is the fifth and final Proud Boys members to be sentenced here today.
Thank you for that, Melina. Are masks coming back? At least for now, President Biden will be wearing one. How's the president doing after the First Lady testing positive for COVID-19? This as he's scheduled to leave the country for the G20 summit. NTD's Iris Tao brings us more from the White House.
We're now just days away from the high-profile G20 summit in India, which President Biden is scheduled to go to. But today, the White House announced that President Biden will now have to start wearing a mask when he's around people indoors, although he can take it off when he's far away enough from other people. Today, while attending an award ceremony at the White House, the president wore a mask when he was walking in through the crowd, but took it off shortly after he arrived on stage and before he was about to speak. And this, of course, is after First Lady Jill Biden, who last spent time with the president together just the last Labor Day weekend, and tested positive for COVID-19 on Monday night. President Biden tested negative on both Monday night as well as on Tuesday morning. And the White House says that he's going to continue to get tested on a regular cadence, though without specifying what that cadence would mean. And today, the White House press secretary was also pressed on what seemed to be some coughing by the president on Monday. Watch.
Just wondering if he had any other symptoms or if there's any concern around that.
No symptoms at all.
What a regular cadence?
Regular cadence is up to really in consultation with his physician. I can tell you right now, as I said, all travelers are certainly going to test, right, before they head out to India, and that's including the president.
The White House today would not tell us if there's any contingency plans made in case Biden tested positive for COVID, but it did hint at the possibility that Biden might have to attend the G20 summit virtually.
We've seen various leaders at various times participate virtually in events.
Biden said on Monday that he's disappointed that China's Xi Jinping will not attend the G20 summit. But right now it's really unclear if Biden will become the third world leader to have to be at least physically absent at the summit after both Russia's Vladimir Putin as well as China's Xi Jinping pulled out from the summit. Reporting from the White House, Iris Howe, NTD News.
As President Biden masks up, some places around the U.S. are recommending or even mandating the use of face masks. NTD's Arian Pazdar takes a look at the current situation.
This week, Morris Brown College in Atlanta has reportedly ended its mask mandate. The college announced the mandate together with limitations on gatherings in late August. The announcement sparked backlash nationwide. To explore this issue and more, I spoke with Dr. Peter McCullough, who is a cardiologist and author of The Courage to Fight COVID-19. The 14-day mask mandate at Morris Brown College has now ended. Do you think the mandate was necessary? And do you think it might have helped in stopping the spread among students and staff?
The mandate wasn't necessary. It basically represents choreography. The Cochrane analysis by Dr. Ferguson was very conclusive. Public masking does not work whatsoever.
In January, the Cochrane analysis found that there's no evidence to prove masks reduce the spread of COVID. It was one of the largest trials of its kind. A CNN anchor recently confronted former White House chief medical advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci about the analysis. Watch.
When you took at the broad population level, like the Cochrane study, the data are less firm with regard to the effect on the overall pandemic. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about an individual's effect on their own safety.
Dr. McCullough says the only reasonable context Dr. Fauci might be referring to is in hospitals. The recent COVID measures come amid a small rise in hospitalizations, as CDC data shows. However, they're still much lower than they were in February this year. The slight uptick has been attributed to a new variant, BA.2.86. Some are saying the variant can be fought using vaccines. Dr. McCullough disagrees, saying by the time vaccines for this specific variant are developed, the strain will have changed.
I don't think the U.S. government should be spending any money on the vaccines. I'm not recommending them to my patients at all.
He says what does help to stop the spread of COVID is using iodine-based nasal sprays and gargles, which reduce the viral load in nose and mouth. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
And turning our attention now to the 2024 presidential election, a new poll finding that former President Trump is still holding sway in the GOP primary field by a large amount. But the second-place candidate in also important New Hampshire may surprise you. NTD's Sam Wong brings us the latest.
According to a new survey from the Wall Street Journal, former President Trump is now the most favorable candidate for nearly 60% of Republican voters. Trailing him is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is dominating the rest of the field by a very slim margin. The gap between the top two contenders has nearly doubled since April, with Trump leading DeSantis by a staggering 46%. A major takeaway from this poll, the former president continues to enjoy rock-solid support, even as he battles a string of criminal investigations targeting him and some of his associates. Most GOP primary voters said that the indictments were politically motivated, and the overwhelming majority of them believe that Trump's response to the 2020 election was legitimate.
It's kind of this idea of the left and the deep state don't decide who our nominee is, we decide. And so the more the status quo pushes to control this primary, the more they want to push back.
Moving on to President Biden, over 70% of registered voters believe that the 80-year-old commander-in-chief is too old to serve another term, and around half of voters said the same about Trump, who is only 3 years younger. As for the current second-place GOP candidate, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley is catching up to Ron DeSantis in the state of New Hampshire. An NMB research poll shows that support for each of the two contenders is sitting at roughly the same level.
For the mainstream audience, I think there's no question Nikki Haley came out first. You know, for those who kind of establishment, who want to return to that type of Republican, Nikki just showed out.
The first official GOP primary will be held in New Hampshire early next year. Sam Wong, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.